Hello everybody and welcome to our walkthrough for the third elite dungeon, the Shadow Reef. Shadow Reef, of course, very well known for the mobs at the beginning being a good way of farming gold and XP at mid to high levels, and of course the final boss Ambassador being renowned for dropping the pieces of the Eldritch crossbow, which is the big kind of money reward from this dungeon, though it is of course quite rare. Other than that, the drops from bosses in this dungeon aren't actually that great, but of course you can do this dungeon as part of a trio run, doing all 3 dungeons to get that elite chest at the end. I won't talk too much through the sections of mobs here, because they are very well covered in guides to doing short elite dungeon runs, but in brief, the Crassian scuttlers and warriors will attack with melee, the Crassian scouts will attack with range. You can usually pretty comfortably soul split them as long as you're doing reasonable damage. Some of the later sections you'll see you have cloaked zealots by the barriers here. You want to kill them because they will be spawning Crassian minions if you leave them alive for too long. Ignore the sea horrors up here and just run down to the barrier, clear the mobs out there, and then the next section you have a pile of zombies. You can switch to your salve amulet if you want to, though you don't really need to. And of course, if you get bossy McBossface spawning like he has done here, you can clear him out, and if you draw the zombies over, then you can AoE them all down at the same time as you're killing him, for some nice extra dungeoneering tokens. Once the zombies are down, go over the mast, clear through the last zombies, and then the few Crassians and zealots outside, and you will be into the first boss fight of this elite dungeon, which is of course the Crassian Leviathan. This is pretty straightforward, possibly the easiest of the elite dungeon bosses. The only thing to watch out for is right at the beginning, he will spew a massive line of poison down the middle, which you see Hybrid here completely fails to dodge, and so he dies and leaves Agile and I to clear this boss by ourselves. So just make sure you're staying to the side at the beginning. Shortly after the poison, he will begin sweeping his head from side to side like this. You want to run over to the side that he is sweeping his head towards, stay there until he gets all the way to the edge, and then run back across because he will be swiping back across the other way. If you're meleeing, you can stand where I'm standing now, and if he's whipping his head towards you, then that will keep you out of the way of it, but do just be ready to run to the other side once he finishes and is getting ready to come back. In total, he will do that head sweep twice, and then shortly after that, he will get ready to jump to the other side of the arena. When he jumps, you want to run or surge very quickly across to the other side. You need to watch out for the heads that are on each side of the arena, because they can stun you if you get too close, and you can die very easily if you get caught in the middle there. But just run towards the Crassian Leviathan, and once again you want to be standing to the side, just staying out of the way of that poison attack that he's going to be doing again very shortly. And that's pretty much it for this fight. We'll just finish DPSing him down here, and then we'll be on to the next section, and Hybrid will once again join us. The only other thing to note on this boss is that it can heal, so you want to be using some poison to negate that, either using Cinderbanes as we're using here, or if you don't have Cinderbanes then you can just apply some weapon poison, which conveniently is dropped by some of the mobs in this dungeon. Once the Leviathan's down, go and clear through the pile of Crassians outside this barrier, a couple more zombies, and then we're through and you dive off the cliff down to the next section. At this point you want to equip your enchanted salve amulet if you have got one of those with you, because most of the mobs that you'll be fighting through this next section up to Taraket, and indeed for a while afterwards, will be undead, so that gives a nice damage boost against them. Once you're through into this section here, your objective is to activate the artifacts on each side, so you'll see Hybrid charges over, kills the necromancer who is guarding the barrier, and once the barrier is down he can go through and kill the artifact. Once both artifacts have been tagged, the barrier to the bridge will open up, and then head onto the bridge. Now usually on this bridge the skeletons, who you can see on either side, will be attacking you with range, and they can do a lot of damage, so if they are there you want to pray range and use devotion to block all damage from that. Of course at the moment it's a little bit bugged, so they're not attacking you, which makes this section a lot more chilled. You can either pray melee or soul split and just DPS through these 2 sea horrors here. The sea horrors can also hit pretty hard, so do watch out for that. Eat up if you need to. Once you're off the bridge, just clear through the last few mobs and then you'll be into the fight against Taraket. Once the barrier is down, you can teleport out here to restock if you need to get more food before heading into the fight, or otherwise just head in. Now, Taraket will usually be attacking with Mage, So start off by praying Mage. The only exception is he will occasionally cast Death's Swiftness, and once that's down he will be attacking using range, so do just watch out for that and be prepared to prayer switch if necessary. Head in and start DPSing at Taraket down. Probably want to do a Death's Swiftness if you're ranging, Sunshine if you're maging, and Berserk if you're meleeing. Try and burst him down to half his health pretty quickly, and when he hits 200k, as you see here, he will hop up into the air and become briefly invincible, and he will fly over to the pillar over here and summon one of his 2 minions, the first one here being the Bloated Monstrosity. If you're doing really good DPS you can ignore it, but generally it's safer to kill it, because it will be hitting you and also making Taraket hit harder. And the best way to do that, as we're doing now, is to bring it over to the middle where Taraket will return, and then you can use AoE abilities to attack both of them at the same time. The other mechanic you need to watch out for from Taraket is this Rift of Undeath, which he will occasionally spawn. When it's up, it will periodically spawn skeletons, which can stack up and A, do a lot of damage, and B, they will heal Taraket after a short time. So you do want to try and kill the Rift of Undeath as soon as it spawns. In this instance, because it's grouped up with Taraket and the monstrosity in the middle, we can just continue using AoE abilities to try and clear through all of them. Once you get Taraket down to around half health again, he'll go over to the other pillar and summon the second minion, the Corpse Carrier. This one you do want to kill because it will periodically spawn skeletons while it's alive, which once again, as well as hitting you for a fair amount of damage, will heal Taraket shortly when he siphons health from them, so try and kill the Corpse Carrier pretty quickly, just so they don't stack up too much. Once more, if you bring it back to the middle, then you can hit both it and Taraket at the same time, which will speed things up a bit. If you see here, firstly he has just cast Death's Swiftness, so he'll be attacking with range, so we should be switching to pray range. He'll also start his final special, the Ghost Wall. You see there's a line of ghosts that spawns here and is going to move towards Hybrid and do a pretty heavy amount of damage to him as it passes through. To mitigate this, you can either move out of the way of it, as Agile and I have done, or if it spawns on top of you, then you want to quickly switch to praying melee, which will reduce damage from that ghost line. And you see there's another rift right at the end there, but because Taraket's nearly dead, we just focus on bringing him down. And that is the fight done. Then we're into the final section of mobs. You just want to kill the first Calgarian demon here to open the barrier, and then once you're through you can ignore all the rest of them and just run around to the far side as we're doing here. Make your way through this section. Your goal is to clear all the necromancers. Once you've brought them down, then the barrier will open. And through the barrier is very much the same thing. The Magister can spawn here, kill him if he's there, because you get a free key to the crossing from him, which is a very nice little bit of money. Now kill the last couple of necromancers and dive down to the final section of the Shadow Reef. We're back to fighting Crassians here. There are a number of warriors and scouts and scuttlers spaced throughout, as well as some more cloaked zealots, which we'll see in a bit. The only other mob to be aware of is these warped skeletons. They hit both with magic and melee, and they can hit pretty hard, so keep your health high and try and burst through them quickly, and do watch out if you're getting low. Clear the zealots here and the last couple of warped skeletons. And then as you're running through this section, ideally you want to hug the wall to the west to avoid drawing the aggro of the mini-bosses here, which you can see we failed to do. Do watch out if they aggro to you, because particularly with both of them there, they can be hitting you pretty hard, so do just go and clear through them. And then the final couple of Crassians outside the barrier, and that will let you in to the final boss fight of this dungeon, which is against the Ambassador. Once the barrier is down, you can, as always, teleport out and restock if you need to. You want to have a pretty full inventory of supplies going in, because the Ambassador is a challenging fight, particularly when you are first learning it. As with many of these boss fights, it gets significantly easier once you are doing improved DPS, but while you're just starting out, it will take a while for you to get through, and the mechanics can be pretty punishing. Now, first thing to be aware of, the Ambassador will primarily attack with range, so you want to be praying that, but he will start off with a single magic attack. You can see this blue cloud here, so either use Disruption Shield as we're doing here, or pray Mage to mitigate that. But he will do that periodically throughout the fight, so do watch out for that when it happens and be prepared to prayer switch when needed. Also be aware that it has an AoE, so if you are standing next to your friend when you get hit by that, then they will also take damage. The first mechanic to be aware of is Corruption, which you see Agile dealing with here. He does this really cleanly, escaping out of the way just before it spawns, so that the corruption is placed on the far side of the arena, well out of the way of where we're going to be moving. Shortly after that, he will spawn 3 black holes, 1 for each player in the arena. You need to stun the black holes to get rid of them. If you fail to do that, then they will hit you for a lot of damage. So if you're using Revolution here, then make sure you have a stun that isn't on your Revolution bar, just so you can be sure you'll have a stun off cooldown when this mechanic triggers, and coordinate it with your friends so that you are stunning 1 each. Now, depending on how much DPS you're doing, you may get another set of corruption in phase 1, and then either after a minute or after you reduce him to 650k health, as you can see we've done here, he will go into the next mechanic, which is the spinners. He will spawn 6 sinister fragments around the arena, and then there'll also be a 3-way energy beam, which is slowly moving around, as you can see here. And very simply, your aim for this section is to clear through as many spinners as possible, ideally getting all 6 down before the timer runs out and he absorbs these fragments. So ideally, you want to be slowly making your way around the circle, staying between 2 arms of the beam and clearing through each spinner as you come to it. But if you're not doing quite enough DPS, and there are some that still have a little bit of a health when you leave them, then ideally you want to surge or bladed dive back through the beam after the beam has passed that spinner to continue attacking that spinner and to make sure you finish it off. It is much better to have finished this phase just having completely killed 3 or 4 spinners than it is having done most of the damage to all 6 of them but not actually having cleared any. The more spinners you leave alive, the more big hits you will have to deal with immediately after this special, so do try and completely finish them if you can. If you're using melee, you can use barge and bladed dive to move between the spinners. If you're using a 2-handed melee, as we're doing here, I would strongly recommend having laceration boots to allow you to bladed dive with it. The only other thing I'll say is do be careful about using movement abilities here, because you see, as Hybrid does here, if you surge too far, you can get caught in the beam, and you absolutely do not want to get caught in the energy beams during this special, because they will do a lot of damage to you. You see Hybrid here, even with the reduced damage from trimmed masterwork, is taking a very heavy hit from wandering into this beam, and only just manages to eat up in time. After a certain time, hopefully you have cleared all 6 spinners, or at least a reasonable number of them, the beams will stop and the ambassador will reabsorb any sinister fragments that are left over. You'll then see a bar filling up above his head, and when that bar reaches full, he will do a big hit of damage, and he will repeat this once for each fragment he absorbed. So ideally, you didn't leave any fragments alive, so you don't have to worry about this at all. But if you did leave some fragments alive, then you need to use defensives to mitigate the damage from this big hit, because otherwise it will hit you super hard. You have some options here. If you've just left 1 alive, then there's a nice and straightforward option of just using resonance to block damage from the hit. Just be aware that he does do an auto attack very shortly before the final big hit, so do make sure you wait for that auto attack and only use your resonance afterwards. Other options which you'll need to use if you have more than 1 spinner left alive, you can use a combination of debilitate and reflect. That should last long enough for you to tank 2 of the attacks with it, and that should bring the damage down to a reasonable level, which you can then deal with. You can also use disruption shield, as I'm doing here. That will do the same job as resonance in just completely blocking the damage from an attack, but again, do make sure you wait till the auto has triggered before you use that. Once they're down, Ambassador will return to doing the specials he was doing during the first phase, so you'll get more corruption and more black holes. And if you're just starting out and not doing great DPS, then be aware that he can also repeat the spinner's attack, but hopefully you won't have to worry about that. Once Ambassador reaches 550k life points, as you see here, he will summon a number of Crassian minions. You don't want to attack these because you won't deal very much damage to them, and Seriu is about to clear them out in the next phase, so just ignore them and continue focusing on Ambassador. Once you get Ambassador down to 400k HP, Seriu will appear, and she will immediately heal all of you up to full health. So if you can, try and avoid eating during the section immediately before that, so that you can make the most of that heal and not waste any food. Shortly after that, Serial will send a wave of fire across the screen, which will clear through all these Crassians. And once she's done that, we are into the final phase of this fight, which is the Black Hands. Now, if you're doing good DPS, as we're doing here, you can burst through this phase pretty quickly and not have to worry too much about the mechanics. And I'll just show you a little bit of a slower kill that we did, so that you can see what these mechanics are and how to deal with them. Firstly, each time one of these Black Hands slaps the ground, it will send out 3 balls of energy towards the Ambassador. If you stand between the hand and the Ambassador as these blobs spawn, then you will block them. You'll take a little bit of damage, but they won't reach the Ambassador. You'll see the blobs of energy are turning black if this is the case. If you don't stand in the way of them, then they will remain white, and when they reach the Ambassador, they will heal him. If he gets lots of healing from these blobs, it can significantly prolong this phase. Once a hand has slapped the ground, the hand that is just around the circle clockwise from it will do so shortly afterwards. So the easiest way to deal with this mechanic is by positioning the 3 of yourselves in front of the 3 hands that slap the ground, and then from there slowly walk clockwise round the circle, making sure you are standing in the way of each hand as it hits the ground. And the final mechanic you need to worry about during this phase, or indeed during this fight, is his magic special. You'll see here he says my name and then fall now and be forgotten. And very shortly after he says that, I will take 5 successive very heavy magic hits. Now, the way you want to deal with this is to pray magic and use devotion, and this will completely block all damage from that attack, which is very, very nice. If you don't have devotion, then the way to respond to this is to switch to a shield and use both debilitate and reflect, and that will mean that the attacks aren't hitting you for too much damage. He will continue using this attack periodically throughout the final phase until you have finished him, and be aware that if you get 2 of these in a row, then you won't have devotion off cooldown for the second one, so for that one you do want to use debilitate and reflect. Anyway, once the Ambassador reaches 0 life points, the fight is done, and you have completed the Shadow Reef. If you've done Elite Dungeon 1 and 2 in order before this, then you will get a nice shiny Elite chest at the end, which will probably have lots of energy and scales for you. And if nothing else, even if you don't get a good drop at all, you have the satisfaction of knowing you have beaten the Ambassador, which is one of the more challenging boss fights in the game. Anyway, I will leave it there. Thank you very much for watching this walkthrough, everyone. I will see you next time.